Hey, getting the YouTube stream going. Welcome to A Ton of Open Studio. This is episode 10. If you have a mix that you're working on, rough mix, demo, final master, absolutely anything, you could send it in at any time to atonuvrecords@gmail.com. And I am here every day at 6 p.m. Eastern. Hit me up anytime, and we will take a look at your mix. So far, I've got a master from David and a final mix, probably. So we're going to take a look at that. Going to give people a couple of minutes to get into the stream, get into the chat. And I am going to experiment. We're on episode 10. So this is 10 days in a row of doing the stream, and I love it. I want to tweak the format a little bit. So far, I've kind of partitioned out 6 to 8 p.m. as kind of this free-for-all. And as of this moment, there's a lot of dead time in the show, waiting for mixes to come in. And there's people all over the world tuning in and engaging, which I think is just cool as heck, and I love it. I'm also realizing that a lot of people are catching the replays of the stream. So I want to kind of trim the fat and get rid of all of the time of me just kind of waiting for tracks to come in. So I'm going to start experimenting with kind of designating before 6 p.m. Eastern is when you can send tracks in. And then what I've got by 6, I'll dive into and keep the show constrained around what I already have. And if something comes in like while I'm talking, then yeah, absolutely we'll get to it. But once we run out of material, I think I'm going to go ahead and call the stream early. And I'm going to experiment with that for the next few days, just because I think it might be easier for everyone to get more content out of it when you catch the replay. And then I'm not going to like blow my voice out or burn myself out waiting for tracks for a couple hours. So I hope that's not controversial, but that's what we'll go for the next few days. So if you've got tracks, send them in. Anything that gets sent in before 6, I'm going to take a look at it that night's stream, and then we're going to keep these tight and focused around content, like a good content producer on the YouTube machine. So, David, you sent me stuff. If you're around, give me a heads up, and we'll get into your stuff. If anyone has stuff, send it on in to atonuvrecords@gmail.com, and I'm just going to wait a couple of minutes, and then we're going to dive right in to the stuff. And I hate silence, so here comes some background music. All right, everybody. I'm going to start diving into David's tracks in about 3 minutes, is what I'm going to call it. And just to get everyone caught up in the same, on the same page, this is Atonuv Open Studio. Nightly in-depth mix coaching, feedback, and, general tips and tricks and pointers. It's every night, 6 p.m. Eastern Time. You can send tracks in to my email, which is atonuvrecords@gmail.com. The link is in the description. And we've been doing this for a bit over a week, and I absolutely love it. I'm having a really, really good time. Definitely the best time that I've had over the last 6 months. And I've been doing kind of a very, very loose format so far, where I'm just streaming for a couple hours every night, and tracks kind of trickle in, and then we kind of build the show around that. And I was watching some of the tape and also seeing who all is on the stream. There's a lot of people from all over the world, different time zones. They're waking up when I'm going to sleep. I'm going to sleep when they're waking up. We're all backwards. And there's a lot of people who are sending tracks in and then catching the replays the next day. And there's a lot of downtime while I'm waiting for tracks. So from here on out, or at least for the next few days, we're going to see how it goes. Tracks that are sent before 6 p.m. Eastern, I'll take a look at on that night's stream and then call it a day. This way, it's going to be easier for people to catch the replay, and they're going to know that their track is somewhere in the allotted time of the video. And I'll keep my voice fresh, keep my brain fresh, and I'm not just, talking to a camera while I wait for tracks to come in. If that works out, then we're going to go with that. And if it doesn't, then we'll go back to the, kind of stretchy, loose form. Absolutely anything that works. So I'm just going to play with that, and I just want everyone to know, just in case we've gotten locked into a groove. So I'm going to, say it a bunch and repeat it and, be repetitive. So I'm going to go ahead and pull up David's tracks, and the first one is a master of a Billie Eilish remix. So I'm going to mute the stream and listen to it. But I'm really excited about this because we talked about it a couple of days ago, and it was the first master, and we talked about like mastering workflow, maybe changing some of the plugins, and I got the coolest email, and I'm just gonna pull it up and go over some of the highlights. So we talked about replacing the multiband compressor because a lot of the time we don't actually need a multiband in mastering, which is kind of counter to a lot of the loose advice and information they see online. It's like, oh, yeah, you're mastering, so you need to use a multiband. And honestly, it doesn't come up that often. So David switched out the multiband for an SSLG, and, made a big difference, more dynamics in the bass, and didn't hit the limiter as hard. So I'm going to take a look at loudness and see what's going on with that. Yeah, that's what's going on in this master. So I am going to mute the stream and take a listen so that we don't get a copyright ding. I have a little, yeah, there we go. Here we go, muting. Okay, that is so much better than I don't remember if it was last night or the night before that I listened to the first master on this, but it is so much better. It is way less squashed. We have way more range on it. It sounds super creamy, super approachable, big, and it's coming out of the speakers, and it's doing all of that really, really great stuff that we want a piece of music to do. I am gonna be so micro picky on this because I think that it's almost perfect. Basically, you've done such a great job of maintaining great dynamics, really, really good control. Everything sounds better now. That chorus drops, and we are just pushing the dynamic range down a little bit. It's considerably better than the last one that I heard, but it is still just a little bit too squashed. And it's specifically coming from the bass, not the kick. The kick is perfect. That kick is just rock solid the entire time. That bass comes in really heavy on the chorus drop, and it's swamping the mix a little too hard, and it's sucking everything down and compacting it a little bit too much around it. Like I can feel the mix collapse around the bass rather than feel like it's getting fuller. It feels like it's getting like too tight and constricted there. So there's a couple of things that you could do. In the master stage, you could just watch your compressor, the SSL, and tweak the high pass on it so that the bass isn't touching it at all, and maybe we'll get a little more dynamic range out of it. Maybe. The other thing that I would do is I would go back to the mix and I would take a look at that bass line and just make sure that it's not getting heaps of gain reduction on it in compression in the mix. So you could maybe ease up on the compression on the bass in the mix, and also just tuck it back like a couple dB, like 2 dB, just pull that chorus bass back, and then your entire mix is gonna feel bigger, and it'll actually feel bassier when it hits, because right now you're crushing it too much. So that would be the most like destructive thing to do on the mix, is just to go back to your mix and just pull that chorus. I mean, it's the biggest change, but it's the least destructive, I guess, is a better way to phrase that. Because anything else that you're doing in the master of like tweaking your final compressor or anything like that, that's like maybe being a little too heavy-handed in the mastering process, especially when you have the session available to you. So I would do that. It's just that chorus, the chorus as a whole is crunching your dynamic range too much. And then specifically, it is the bass that is doing it. Like when I can see the bass come in and then it squunches around it and it sounds like it's scrunching around it. So I am being so micro picky on it at this point because it's really, really, really good. And that last little bit of dial is going to make it like a perfect track. It's super, super cool because you've sent a few mixes of this. This is the second master, and it's just getting so much better every single time. And I think that is the last little bit of tweaking to just put it over the edge. So, awesome, awesome stuff. I'm going to take a look at your baseline mix. I am also excited to look at this, and let's see where we're at on this. You went into bus processing. We talked about that. Parallel drum compression, rear bus, awesome, and other small stuff. And, lifted the track. That's amazing. I am going to listen to it in 1 second. We'll listen to the whole thing because We don't have any other track submissions. If someone wants to send something, like right now, you can send it to atonuvrecords@gmail.com. I'll take a look at it, coach you through the mix, absolutely anything that you need. And for anyone watching, joining in, this is a ton of open studio. Episode 10. So I've been doing this for a bit over a week, and it's been so cool to work with so many people and get this going. I am going to tweak the format a little bit. For the last 10 days, I've been starting the stream at 6 and then just letting it run until about 8 o'clock. And there is a lot of dead time in between receiving mixes where there's not like a lot of content happening, and it is fun and I do like hanging out. But I'm also thinking about all the people that are watching the replays the next day, because people are all over the world. They are asleep when I'm doing this, or they're at work, etc., etc. And I think it's going to be more convenient for everybody if I keep these tight and focused around your mixes so that it's just like a nonstop content fest. So from here on out, at least for the next few days, while we see if this works, send mixes before 6 p.m. Eastern. And anything I get that day, I'll take a look at on the stream that night and then call it good on the stream so that people can just watch mix reviews instead of just me, hanging out. So yeah, we're going to try that for the next little bit. And that is, I'm just going to say that a few times because I don't want anyone to miss that. So here is baseline 2, and we're going to go ahead, listen to it, and see what's going on. There is a meaning buried within the sound, like a dream filling the sky while sleeping on hollow ground. Okay, that's awesome. Yeah, huge. Sounds great. All of those little automation tweaks really make it exciting. It tells the story. It brings me from beginning to end. It's doing everything, and it does. It sounds, huge, powerful, lifted, all that stuff that we were talking about. So, is it ready for mastering? Yeah, it could. It's absolutely there. Like the song is there. What if I got this to master? What that's kind of what I was thinking about while I was listening to it here, because this is at the very least very, very close to a final mix. So I was putting on mastering brain while I was doing it, and the only thing that I felt was missing in it is some of the it felt like there wasn't a whole lot of punch. And that's from like 200 to 250 or 300, and that's what I would dial in when I'm doing like my mastering enhancement, like after I do like all of just the basic cleaning and all that, is I would focus on that 200 to 300 region, and I would just give it like a nice, like I'm talking like 1.5 dB, maybe 2 dB, and I would use my 2BQ so that it has some saturation and excitement in that area. And that's what I would do on your master, is I would really look at 200 to 300, and that's what I would enhance, and maybe a little bit of girth at 60, like something like maybe 1 dB, like Pultec style, just nudging it up just a little bit, but especially that 200 to 250 or 300-ish region, the punch zone, because I felt like it had like great presence and it was really full. So like mid-range and high mid-range, and then there was tons of ear candy and sparkly stuff. So like the high highs were taken care of. Kick, I was feeling that kick. Low end is nice and clean. We've really dialed that in. And that's what I would focus on in the master. So that said, you have the benefit of having the mix. So consider just on like the drum bus, giving it a little bit from 200 to 300. And that could really, like, that might be the move. That said, and like best hygiene, best practices is like, oh yeah, do it in the mix, don't do it in the master. But also, this is such I'm talking 1.5 dB. Like that's where I'm at. I'm getting so minute on this thing. It's maybe possibly best addressed in the master, because we just want to give the whole track a feel of punch and like fullness in that region, some heft, some beef, and maybe micromanaging it in the mix won't be as good as just giving the entire track. It very rarely is that the case, but I could also see it being the case in this specific track. And once again, I like to do the visual thing to help out, but like my perception was like not enough punch. Like always listen first and then take a look at a graph. But I mean, what's really interesting is we can see it. This dip right here. Like everything is pretty well accounted for on the whole thing, but we are seeing just a little like relative deficiencies, specifically right in between 200 and 250, which is like punch. That's where it lives. And on a track like this, I really want to feel like it's in my face. And that's going to do that. I'm being so picky once again, just because I think this is a great track and a great mix, great arrangement, great melody. Everything is really, really good. So I am dialing in crazy picky stuff. So, David, awesome job. I've really, really loved taking a look at this. Thanks for sending your stuff. It's a joy to listen to. So, awesome. Awesome, awesome, awesome. All right, folks. So, this is a ton of Open Studio. If you are just joining in, this is a nightly live mix coaching and feedback and overall audio hangout. If you have a mix that you want me to take a listen to, you can send it over to atonuvrecords@gmail.com. The link is in the description. And for the last week, we're just kind of getting started on this whole thing. I've kind of just set up my camera, started streaming, and just gone for a couple hours from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. And this is like the fourth time I've said this, if you're watching the entire time. I've kind of just filled dead space with, just kind of hanging out. And I was just thinking that for all the people that are watching, like on separate time zones that are asleep when this is happening, the big 2-hour stream is kind of hard to sort through, especially if you've sent a track in. So from here on out, what I'm going to do is send your tracks before 6, and I will get to them and give them as much time as they possibly need to get like good detailed feedback. But I will stop just letting the stream run for 2 hours regardless, and I'm just going to base the length of the stream on how many tracks I get before 6 that day. That way, when you watch the replays, you're going to know that that you're just getting content instead of having to sort through me talk about just random stuff. So from here on out, that's what we'll be doing. I'll be a little bit loosey-goosey today because it's a change. So yeah, that's the deal. So I did just get a track from Sorta Kinda, who has sent some stuff before. So I am downloading that. We'll take a look at it. If you want to send something, you can send it to atonuvrecords@gmail.com. And, final mixes, masters, demos, absolutely anything. Just put Open Studio in the subject line so that I know you're cool with me playing it. So here is Soaring by Sorta Kinda. Let's take a listen. Yeah. like you were saying in the chat, that piano is great. That is really, 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 um, it has a lot of grit and it has a nice presence and it sounds really nice. It's hard to get a piano to sit that nicely in the mix. So awesome stuff. And I remember the last track you sent, the vocoder voice was a bit too essy, and that feels way more dialed in on this track. So excellent work on that, on just kind of generally improving on stuff. Really, really, I mean, that's just a nice track. It feels really good, and it's in a great place already. There are a couple of things that I would smooth out in the mix. I'm not sure what like stage you're in the mixing process, but basically, I think that the claps are a little heavy at 2K, and I would just notch that out a little bit. You're over representing 2K just a little bit, and that's always a frequency to watch out for. So watch out for 2K. And conversely, it's kind of like you still have a fair amount of headroom in the mix. You could pull 2K back, and there's also a little too much at 8K. That could still be claps. It's kind of like 2K and 8K are where you're just a little too heavy, or you could bring up everyone around it. Whatever you're feeling at this stage in the mix, I would probably just cut 2K and like 6 to 8K. The 8K isn't as big of a deal, but that 2K, and it's almost certainly in the clap, watch out for that. Your low end is bordering on blown up. I would pull back a little bit. Let me listen again. Yeah, I would just pull that kick back 2 dB or so. It's good now, like in the mix, like it's really nice, and I like totally understand what you're going for, but it's gonna get you in the master. Like sometimes, like that's just developing a workflow and getting your system set up so that you are giving yourself enough low end to feel it in the mix before you go to mastering, and just developing a workflow around that, because that kick feels good in the mix stage. And like I listen to it, I'm like, this sounds really, really good. Like I understand why it's that forward, because it's super important and it drives it and it sounds really, really, really good. But you're compensating for like a lack of overall volume, mixing, you don't have the limiter, you don't have final loudness, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And like some people I know, they like to feel the bass while they're mixing. So they crank their sub so that it's overrepresented in the room instead of overrepresented in the mix. So it might be something like that, dialing in your room so that it feels a little bit bassier while you are mixing. Because what's going to happen is if the kick and the low end is that hot when this goes in and you're mastering it or someone else is mastering it, you're either going to have to pull that low end back in the master, and that's going to be weird. You wouldn't want to do that in the master. and it's going to eat up so much dynamic range that you're not going to be able to push this track as loud as you would want it to be. It's going to cap your ceiling ahead of time. So I'm being super picky because I think this is awesome. And it's not just like someone could just say like, oh, turn your low end down or whatever all day, but it's more like, let's diagnose what's happening in the process. And like, I like to feel like a medium a bit of sub when I'm mixing. So I have my sub just turned up like a little bit louder than flat, like a little bit louder than baseline. I've got my room measured, and I have like a little bump at 60. And that way I can feel it while I'm mixing at a moderate volume. And then my mixes turn out pretty flat. I know another engineer that just like wants to feel the room shake while they're mixing. And then, you know, you got to feel good while you're mixing. So, and that's the most important thing. So their sub is just cranked stupid loud, even though it's not flat and not correct. They want to feel that like biofeedback, and that's what they need to do a good mix. And then the mix turns out flat, so on and so forth. So, and I recommend having your sub like that you can turn it on and off on your monitor controller, because then if you're mixing with the big boom boom, you can turn it off and definitely listen to what's going on in your mids. So being super picky because I love this track. So yeah, so we're a little bit spiky at 2K. Definitely address 2K. 8K, that's to taste. I would just be aware that you've got a little extra spice at 8K. And then above 10K, there's definitely room to brighten up your mix. And that'll kind of meet that, like, I would maybe like 1 dB lower on 8K, and then 2 to 3 dB, just throwing that at above 10K, just in some of the percussion, maybe in the vocal to give it a little bit of breath and air. Look at that. And let's see. I think I had like one more. No, that's basically it. So take a look at everything from like 150 down. That's what you're going to want to take a look at. And I'm just going to ask a quick question in the chat. There's a delay between the video and the chat, so sometimes I just ask questions a few times. And for anyone who can't see the chat, I'm wondering what the acoustic treatment is like in your room. Okay, so you're only mixing on headphones. That absolutely 100% explains it. And also, it means that you're doing an incredible job, because you're basically making a perfect mix to what you have available to you. So it means your ears are doing the work, and your engineering is incredible. You are, I mean, I bet that if we like took the frequency response graph of your headphones and matched it up to what I've seen in your mixes so far, that it would come out flat. And that's, and I can just tell that you're putting a ton of work into these mixes because they sound good. And, you know, when I'm needling away at like little picky frequency things, even having like a perfect frequency response and dialing in all this, it won't guarantee that your mix sounds good. Like, I can tell that you've done a good mix because it sounds good and it feels good. So now we're just into these picky little things. And a lot of the time when I hear a good mix, but it's a little bit wonky frequency-wise, it's just because you've got a weird monitoring environment. So you're mixing on headphones. That absolutely makes sense, because basically you've got a little too much low end and not quite enough high information above 10K, which is like every single headphone mix in the history of mixes. Okay. So you're also wondering about room treatment. So let's just go through some of the options. Okay. Uh, the most important thing is setting up a reflection-free zone. So, and first off, let me just run you through like the whole plan on how to get just great mixes. And I basically think that people like should not spend money on this except to dial in your room. Like that's the one time. Like don't buy a bunch of plugins, don't buy gear, like all of that. Like it's only you only start buying gear and like specialty plugins when you have a specific need for it and you know that you need that tool. And also like you almost like never like absolutely need something. Like most of the stock plugins available can get you like a really 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 good mix that could like play in the club or play on the radio. Like your end goal could be met with stock plugins. It's just a way to maybe get there faster or maybe get there in a slightly different way. But room treatment and your listening environment is like an inescapable cost to get like a perfect mix in your room. And that said, it's not unaffordable. Okay, so the first thing you got to do is get some monitors that will work flat in your space. And it doesn't have to be big money. The lowest that I could possibly recommend is the JBL SLR, I think, Mark III. There's a new one. And there's a 5-inch and an 8-inch, probably the 8-inch, and would be the way to go. But it depends on your space. If you're working in like a small room, like you could go with a 5-inch speaker and be fine. And then eventually get a sub to hook in. And you could just get the cheapest, like, not the cheapest, but like a beat 'em up, just like a sub that does 60 and it does it and, you know, cool. But if you're in a small room, you can get away with a 5-inch monitor. The JBL SLR, I think, totally good, pretty flat, and that's like the lowest. I actually. Oh, okay, fantastic. So you've got the Rocket 5s. Those are totally fine. Those are good. You're good to go. But you got to treat the room. So we can skip over all of the monitor talk. But if anyone is watching and wondering, those monitors are fine. So, and sorry that my video is going to keep talking about monitors for a minute after you wrote that message because we're on that lag. So it makes me look rude. Room treatment. Best bang for your buck. The first thing you got to do is create a reflection-free zone. Okay? And that is, so it's, here are your speakers. The first thing and the absolute cheapest thing to do is you have to put your monitors in the right place. Okay? And that costs no money. What you want to do is put your head in the right spot. So, your ideal listening position, first off, you got to make sure the 100% absolute no compromise thing is in your room. Your speakers need to be placed along the short wall. So the short wall is in front of me and the long wall is to the side. Absolute cannot change this, or else you're going to have problems and you're just going to have problems that you can't deal with otherwise. So That is the first thing. If that's where you're at, you got to take everything apart and reorient, unfortunately. So, speakers along the short wall. Then you got to get your head into the right listening position, which is 33.3% back from the front wall. Okay, so if the room was 100 feet deep, your head would need to be 33 and a third feet from the front wall. Okay, just to do like the easiest math possible. Basically, break out a tape measure and then do some math. Okay, so you got to be 33.3% back from the front wall. That's where your head is going to be living. That's the sweet spot, and that avoids the most amount of room modes. So, like if you walk around a room, if you play a sine wave, you can walk around and you'll hear that it's different volumes in different parts of your room. And 33.3% back is the sweet spot to avoiding room nodes in like 99% of rooms. So that's the first thing. So you got to get your head in the right spot. And then from there, you got to position your monitors around, and you want the monitors to be equidistant from the walls. So like 5 feet of wall to the left, 5 feet of wall to the right from the speakers, equidistant from the wall. You will generally get a flatter response if you get your speakers a decent distance from the front wall, depending on where we're at, like the size of the room, et cetera, et cetera. That's going to change and vary, and you got to kind of get your feng shui going on that. So, like 1.5 feet, 2 feet away from the wall. You can also get decent response with them closer to the wall, but it's a little bit tougher. Then, okay, so a little bit off the wall. Then you got to make an equilateral triangle between your head and the speakers. So this is going to be very much so based on where your head is. We've determined the ideal listening position for your head, 33.3% back from the front wall. Then you got to do this measuring and this math and dial it in so that your speakers are equal distance from each other and an equal distance from your head. So if it's if they're 1.5 feet apart, they need to be 1.5 feet from your head. So get that dialed in. And I'm going to go out on a limb and say that in like most cases, your monitors are going to be a lot closer together than you would think to make the best, flattest sound. And that is a thing. And be comfortable with it, because like those KRKs and like every single monitor until you're spending like 20 grand is a near field monitor. They're built to have stereo imaging that's basically just pointed right at your face. So you got to angle them in and do all that stuff. And you're going to get the best phase coherency and frequency response, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So don't be surprised if your speakers wind up closer than you would have thought after you do these steps. So line up on the short wall, 33.3% back from the front wall. That's where your head lives. Bring your speakers out, angle them in, equal distance from the walls, and then the speakers are at equal distance from each other and your face. That's where we're at so far, to recap. So after you've got all of that dialed in, then you're going to be in a better place to get your room sounding better. And you're also going to have a smaller target to hit to make your room sound better, because all you need is your head to sound good, okay? You're dialed in, you're in the sweet spot, you got to get that sweet spot dialed in. Yes, and I do keep these streams up. I know this is a lot of info. Okay, so after you've got those speakers positioned, Then you're going to set up an RFZ, a reflection-free zone. So what you got to do is get pretty beefy, like rigid panels, no foam, no like Oralex. The cheapest consumer option is the Premacoustic panels. So, we're talking about like 1.5-inch rigid fiberglass panels, and that is what you'll need between your ears and the speaker cones. And you gotta just line like that, okay? So that is between my monitors and my head. And because I have a setup where my head isn't that far from my monitors, that means that there's less space on the wall that I need to treat with the rigid panels. Okay, so it's kind of like a bonus. You're saving money. So, okay, reflection-free zone, it would work as a decent recording area for like a lot of stuff. Vocals, acoustic guitar and stuff. I've got a live room out in there, and it's a little more live. Just because it's like not the biggest live room, so I don't have it 100% dead, so that drums sound like they're like pushing air a little bit, and it sounds good. So like if you're doing drums, then you want to let it breathe a little bit. So let's see. Wait, sorry, not that. So if I were recording in the same room, would the reflection-free zone also work as a decent? Yeah, it'd be a decent recording area. Like if that's what you're working with, it would be decent. Absolutely. So to go back to my train of thought, reflection-free zone lined up between your speakers and your face to the sides. Okay? And that right there is going to get you the most like bang for your buck. It's going to do the most for the least amount of work and money. So set up those speakers, reflection-free zone. The next move is bass traps along the front walls, so behind your speakers. That is going to get you the tightest bass response in most rooms. And yeah, that's so like first step, move your speakers. Second step, reflection-free zone. Step after that, bass traps, which you could absolutely build. Look up the super chunk method. That is the most effective for the least amount of money that you can build a bass trap. That's what I've got going on. And anywhere that there's a corner, you're going to have bass issues. So, just looking around my room. So the most important one is those front walls. So I've got bass traps there that go from floor to ceiling. And then you can look around. Those are bass traps on like, there's corner, and then all along there, corner, et cetera. And then you can see I've got kind of like I've patched stuff around because I've gone around with like a reference mic and I've measured everything. And there's like some panels that look like they're in random places. And then eventually you get into that level of like neuroticism with room treatment. But so we start with reflection-free zone, bass traps on the front walls. Then we start trapping every single corner. And that doesn't have to happen right away, but that's like the next step. And then I have like some mini traps along some of the like big walls behind me, but that's not as big of a deal as getting the reflection-free zone between speakers and bass. there's just kind of general control happening behind my listening area. And then the very last thing that you're going to think about is something like diffusers along the rear wall. And that is incredibly to taste. On the rear wall, you could do... Oh, no. Sorry, there's a step. So, speakers placed, reflection-free zone, bass traps on the front wall. Then it's a cloud above your head between speakers and your head. So move your speakers, reflection-free zone, bass traps on the front wall, a cloud above your head between your speakers and your head. And then you can go into like bass trapping all of your random corners all over your room. And then we get into, do I want a dead room or a diffused room? And that's to taste. So some people like mixing 100% dead, and it just like speakers hit your face and that's it. I like some diffusion, so they're hitting back there and then it's scattering out, and I just have like a little more like I'm feeling like I'm in a space. I don't like the like claustrophobic tight thing. Some people do. So yeah, that's like room treatment in a nutshell, is like the best that I can describe it on a live stream. So to reiterate, we've got speaker placement, RFZ, front wall bass traps, and then a cloud, and then bass traps everywhere, and then maybe diffusion. As far as a sub to get for your rockets, just get the rocket sub, because it's totally fine. And like whatever sub made by a name brand, okay? So like don't go any lower than Rocket, okay? You want to get like a Rocket, a JBL, or a Yamaha, or you know, like a Genelec or an Atom or whatever. But then you're probably, that's like, don't like, just match it. I would just get the Rocket sub. Like that's my shortest, easiest answer. Just grab whatever Rocket generally pairs with the Rocket 5 and you'll be fine. So go with that. Dialing in a sub is going to be a pain in the butt. So here's the thing. When you're using like a sub and small monitor setup, you're going to have to deal with phase issues. So before you get a sub, what I would super recommend is look into SonarWorks with the reference mic. Like without the reference mic, it's pointless. So SonarWorks is like the best room measurement speaker correction software solution that exists for like indie to mid-level studios. And even a lot of like pros will use SonarWorks. And it's going to measure your room as a whole. It'll give you the whole picture. And you're going to be able to like make critical decisions about where your listening point should be and all of that. And it will also apply digital correction within your system, which is really good, above about 150 hertz. Below that, and it can't really account for room issues in the subs, but everything in your mids and your high mids and your high end will be mostly 100% fixed with software. So we want to get the room dialed in as much as humanly possible before we do software correction. But software correction can take us to the to the end zone. So before you get a sub, and like that's the thing with room treatment, it's like a bunch of like boring stuff before you get like fun stuff. But I that is my path that I recommend. So I would do like set up your speakers and do the RFZ, then get Sonar Works, and then measure your room and apply correction, and then start doing bass trapping, and then get a sub. Like that order, and it takes a whole lot of discipline to do it because these are not exciting purchases. This is like, yeah, this and like mic stands is never ever fun to spend money on because you need it, but it's never like, oh boy, my mic stands came today or my XLRs. It's no good. So yeah, RFZ, Sonar Works, start trapping your bass, then get a sub. And you're also going to want to see like how much low end is even getting produced by the Rocket 5s and how your room is interacting with it. Because, I don't know, maybe you're in this really lucky situation where your room is too bass heavy and you have enough low end without bass trapping. And then you're going to save like 2 steps and you're going to save a few $100. Probably not. But sometimes it happens. It's been known to happen. But yeah, Sonar Works, really, really good. Full endorsement. I think that's everything. I think that if you replay this, you'll get everything you need to know about room treatment. And yeah, that's it in a nutshell. If you have any other specific questions, feel free to ask. And if you are joining us, this is Atonuv Open Studio. I'm here every night at 6 p.m. Eastern. You can send a track in for some really in-depth mix feedback and coaching and all of that. Or sometimes we'll talk about room treatment for a half hour, whatever we need to do to get our mixes better. Send tracks to atonuvrecords@gmail.com. This is like my 5th time doing this PSA, so it's going to sound a little bit rehearsed. I've been doing this for the last 10 days, and it's been amazing. And I am going to change the format a little bit from here on out because I have been, doing this stream for 2 hours every night, regardless of what tracks have come in. And looking at the replays, there's a lot of dead time. And I know that there's a lot of people that are watching these replays that are in different countries. They've been asleep while the stream is happening, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I think it's going to be a lot easier for people to get great content and learning and value out of these sessions if I dictate the length of the stream based on the tracks that I've gotten. So from here on out, send your tracks before 6 p.m. Eastern, and I will go through them on the stream and then call the stream a day once we've gone through all of the content. That way, if you're watching this the next day, you know that the whole thing is going to be start to finish content rather than watching me wait for tracks to come in. So, send tracks to atonuvrecords@gmail.com absolutely anytime. And from here on out, I will be starting the stream at 6 and then letting the length of the stream be dictated by how many tracks I have in my inbox. So, that's cool. And I'm going to just take a look at this chat. Cool. Sorta, kinda. Great to see you again. I love your stuff. Good luck on this room treatment quest, and feel free to ask any question anytime and send a track in. It's been awesome. All right. And Mason's wondering what reverb I use. Okay. So I use a few, and it's more like dependent on what I want to do. I'll say that I am leaning heavily on the Kush gold plate, like more often than not these days. it sounds good, first off, and it has a few really, really useful features on it. High pass and low pass, that's great. Like a drive circuit and like onboard compression, and that's really cool to play with, to just like have a compressor on the reverb, and it's tailored for it, so it's kind of a one-stop shop on a lot of stuff, pre-delay, reverb time, and it sounds good. And yeah, I'm using that a lot. I am, and that's for like using it on vocals, snare, guitars, when I want them to be widened out, but I'll put a delay before it, stereo delay into like the plate. I like that. Yeah, I'm using that a lot. And it's kind of like I kind of like go in and out of phases of being like, yeah, this is really good. And I'm of the school of thought that I don't use very many like different plugins. Like I have a lot, but I just get really, really familiar with one and I just get obsessed with it. And I kind of just use it all the time because I know it in and out, and I'll just use it on session after session after session. And so like right now, my default reverb is I just load up the gold plate because I like it. And I'll change it if I run something into it and I'm like, that's not the right reverb. And I'm not going to, I know what I can get out of it, and it's not going to happen with this. So if I'm not getting what I want out of it, I'm going to go to the Slate verb suite, because that is like a modeling reverb. And like, if I'm not getting what I want out of that like really solid plate emulation, then I'm going to go into the world of impulse responses and like synthetic digital, like super, super controlled, expansive verb. Because that's probably what I'm not getting out of the plate. So then I'll go into that and I'll play with like room verbs and stadium verbs and like all of that. And that's like my go-to reverb methodology at this moment in time. So I'm starting with that plate on like everything. And then I'll move into modeling verbs after that. And as of this moment, I haven't really run into a situation where that doesn't do the trick. And if I want to do something like really, really spicy with an effect, then I'll go to the sound toys and get tweaky with like sound effects. So, you know, I'll do stereo delay into reverb, and then maybe pull up the crystallizer and a filter freak and do sound effect stuff, Pan Man, and get into that. Like if the record calls for it, if it's like very, very psychedelic, then I'm going to start reaching into the sound toys and play with that. And that's when we're in like sound effect territory. And that's the whole of it. But yeah, ethos wise and strategy wise, I load up the same plugins on everything, no matter what I'm doing. And partly out of like over familiarity, but it's mostly because I just know what it's going to do. And that's more important. That's more important than the tool you're using, is just deep familiarity with it. Like in all things, like limit yourself to a few things and know them very well, rather than just like throwing 100 different things on a track. Like I just did a mix on a single that I'm like really, really stoked on, and I barely touched the individual tracks. There were a few that I put like a sweetening EQ on, like the kick and the snare and the vocals. And then I bussed everything. And then on the buses, I did like a flavor compressor on the bus and a Pultec. And that was it. And I did the mix with that. And it came out so clean and clear and direct and powerful and punchy. And that's all I did. I used 4 plugins on the entire thing. And it that's all it needed. Yeah, I use a plate on like everything. I don't know, it's a solid go-to. It sounds verby, it doesn't tub out the mix, and it doesn't get murky. It's pretty bright, and I like it on stuff. So, yeah, and I'll pull up a modeling verb if I need it to be like a little bit denser, deeper, and all of that. But most of the time, I want to keep it really light. And that's what I want out of the verb, like most of the time. Yeah, thanks for that, always thanks for the cool questions. All right. So, folks, this is Atonuv Open Studio. And I'm here every day, 6 p.m. Eastern Time. It's been so fun the last week and a half. I've been having a great time. At any time, you can send a mix in to atonuvrecords@gmail.com. That's spelt out in the description. And I'll take a look at it. And from here on out, I'm going to start the stream at 6, load up everything that's been sent before 6 that day, and then that's going to be the program for the show. And from here on out, if you watch a replay, it's going to be start to finish content, mix coaching, feedback, and all of that. No filler. So, okay, we want to see some spicy verbs. So, let me load up something to play with. All right, here's a drum loop. Okay, so if I was going to do a spicy verb, okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with stereo delay. And I like the slate repeater. And I'm going to tap out the... unlink the left and the right. So eighth note, dotted eighth note on left and right. Generally solid. Turn the feedback down a bit. Set it to analog modeling. Then there's this little EQ section right here. I'm going to high pass the right, and then I'm going to high pass the left a little bit higher. Low pass them differently, and color them differently. Then I'll turn the mix down on the delays. Okay, so now I've got stereo width, and it's already a little bit spicy just from doing that. From there, I'm gonna do something like the crystallizer. It's generally gonna be crystallizer if I'm going for spicy. Is it appropriate to do on a drum loop? Absolutely not. But as far as just being able to grab something from my hard drive and knowing that no one is gonna mind, yeah, I'm gonna use a drum loop. So, crystallizer. So, granular delay, okay? Just crazy stuff. And I'll probably start on a preset. Smooth crystals. Yep, so now it's pitch shifting. We can hear octaves and stuff. It's garbling around. Like, that's pretty cool. Dial back the mix. And now I'm getting into sound effect territory. And this is something that I would put like way back in a mix. And it's just gonna flesh stuff out, and it's gonna be the hint of spice and the hint of psychedelia. And I'm gonna use a reverb effect send like this in, probably automated. So I'll send a track to it every now and then throughout the mix just to give it some like really, really big, wide vibe. And this is, this is my basic thought on it. And then maybe put a reverb at the end just to smooth it all out. Yeah, something like that. So, and we're talking about like spicy at this point. Like that is not your go-to like clean vocal verb or whatever, but that's for like, I need it to go into to outer space for 15 seconds. I'm going to set up a chain like that. So that's like stereo delay into granular delay into reverb. And that's what I'm going to do. And then, I'll EQ it and maybe saturate it. But generally it doesn't need to go further than that. Like, you can dial that in to do what you need it to do. And that is, yeah, that's my spicy effects chain. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and call this a day. So this is Atonuv Open Studio. Every day, 6 p.m. Eastern, send tracks in to atonuvrecords@gmail.com. Anything that I get between now and 6 p.m. tomorrow, I will do in-depth analysis, feedback, coaching, the whole 9 yards. And from here on out, you can count on the replay of the stream being beginning to end content. So if you can't catch it live, you can catch the replay, and you don't have to search around for me giving information. So send stuff in absolutely whenever. And I want to end by doing the Patreon shout out. There's a link for that down below. You can get a shout out, one-on-one coaching. That's all there. And I'm thinking about, once we get some more people interacting regularly, I want to do a weekly live mix that'll be just on the Patreon, and it needs to be generating enough people and content before I can like commit to this. But basically, folks who are getting involved in this stream, you're going to be able to send tracks for me to mix, and I'll do them like once a week. I'm thinking Sundays, and do like a whole live stream mix, and it'll be, you know, hours and hours and hours of me just like mixing, and it'll be cool. We need a little more momentum on the stream before I can launch it, but it is in the works. Which also, like, comment, subscribe, and share. The more stuff we have to look at, better it is for everybody. And here is the Patreon shout out. Here's the slide. Thank you, Demeter. Thank you, Mason. Y'all are awesome, and I appreciate it so much. Big shout out. All right, folks, it's been awesome. Send those tracks in, and I will see y'all tomorrow. Oh, Mason, I missed that last question. What would I do to get that reverb? So it's just stereo delay into granular delay. And then the reverb, I'm just dialing it in. It's like a really tight plate, basically, with a moderate amount of filtering on each end. And that's it. But I'll talk to you tomorrow.